Me and my girlfriend were on a romantic trip in Italy after months of emotional distancing due to work. It was supposed to be our chance to reconnect, to rekindle what had been lost between us. But then on the final days, she suddenly told me she wanted to stay without me, to find herself, despite the plans we had made together. The words hit me like a cold wave. It felt like betrayal, like I had misread everything between us. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I cut her off financially and left. Here's the deal. Jay and I had been together for 2 years before the whirlwind of my current job kicked in. Life with her was something out of a feel-good movie. We met at a friend's barbecue and clicked instantly. She had this easy laugh, this way of making even the dullest moments feel vibrant. We spent countless evenings walking through the park, cooking together, binge-watching our favorite series. We were that couple, always holding hands, always planning our next adventure. Back then my job was predictable, 9 to 5 hours with plenty of room for us. But then I got promoted and the dynamic started shifting. It was subtle at first, missing a dinner here, canceling plans there. I told myself it was just a phase, that things would settle soon. Jay was understanding, always saying she got it, but I could see the weight of it on her. The last 2 months had been the worst. Late nights at the office turned into entire weekends lost to work. Our conversations were reduced to short, tired exchanges over meals where we were both glued to our phones. The effortless intimacy we once had now felt like another task on my to-do list. I could feel her frustration growing. Small things set her off, forgetting to buy milk, leaving a wet towel on the bed. We weren't fighting over these things, not really. It was the unspoken resentment, the feeling of neglect that loomed over us. Realizing how much we had drifted apart, I planned this trip. Italy, the dream destination she had always talked about. I booked everything, surprised her with tickets, hoping this grand gesture would bring us back to where we used to be. And for a while it worked. Italy was breathtaking, and for the first time in months we felt like us again. We walked hand in hand through the streets of Rome, took a gondola ride in Venice at dusk, the golden light reflecting off the water as we sat close, her head resting on my shoulder. There was a quiet contentment in those moments, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way back to each other. One night, we had dinner at a tiny restaurant tucked away in a narrow alley in Rome. The place was Jay's find, some hidden gem she had read about in a travel blog. We sat under string lights, sipping local wine, sharing stories about our future, about places we still wanted to see. Felt right. Felt like healing. But then, on our final day, everything changed. We stood on a cliff in Naples, the vast blue sea stretching out before us, when she dropped the bombshell. She wanted to stay. Alone. She said she needed time, needed space to figure things out, to find herself. I was stunned. There had been no warning, no conversations leading up to this. I thought we were healing, but she had been feeling something entirely different. She had already made up her mind. Had already decided that this wasn't working for her. And she hadn't even given me a chance to be part of that conversation until now. The emotions hit me all at once. Anger, confusion, sadness. The betrayal wasn't just about her staying in Italy. It was about everything we had been through, everything I thought we were fixing. Had she been pretending all along? Had those moments of laughter, of closeness, been just illusions? I struggled to keep my composure, standing there with the Mediterranean wind whipping around us. I wanted to ask her why, wanted to make her see what she was throwing away. But deep down I knew. I couldn't force someone to stay if they had already left in their heart. So I made my choice. I told her that if she wanted to find herself, she could do it on her own, without my support, without my help. I had planned this trip for us, had tried to fix things, but if she didn't want me to be a part of her future, then I wouldn't be a part of her present either. I left her in Italy and walked away, boarding my flight back home alone. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about realizing that sometimes, no matter how much you love someone, they might not be meant to stay. And the hardest part of love is knowing when to let go. I addressed the financial side of her decision, a decision she had made alone, but one that would affect us both. Jay, I began, trying to keep my voice even. I want to support you in finding whatever it is you're looking for, but if this is something you need to do alone, then I think it's only fair you take on the financial responsibility for it too. I explained that the trip, as planned, was something I could prepare for, budget for, but extending it was beyond what I had anticipated. As Jay's voice grew louder against the backdrop of the cliffside, her words cut through the gentle hum of the waves below. The tension was palpable, and her accusations stung deep. "Del, how can you just cut me off like this? Is this how you show your love? By holding money over my head?" Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, now flashed with a mixture of frustration and desperation. I tried to keep my own emotions in check, to respond without escalating the situation further. "Jay, this isn't about money," I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's about us, about commitment. When you say you need to stay longer without me, it feels like there's something more, something you're not saying." The accusation stung. This wasn't about money, not really. It was about boundaries, respect for the decisions we were supposed to make together. This trip was meant to be a gesture of healing, not a gateway to a unilateral decision that left me both financially and emotionally overextended. She looked away, her eyes scanning the horizon. I could see the gears turning, her mind wrestling with the implications of her desires versus the realities of our relationship. The air between us felt charged, heavy with unsaid things and unresolved emotions. I took a deep breath, trying to read between the lines of what she wasn't quite saying. "Jay, are you telling me everything?" I asked gently, hoping to coax out what was really on her mind. We ended the conversation with no real resolution, the issue hanging over us like a dark cloud. She was hurt, feeling unsupported in her moment of need for independence. I was confused and upset, feeling like the partner left holding the pieces while she sought something I couldn't give her. On those cliffs, we spent our last night in Italy in silence, each lost in our own thoughts, wondering what the next step would be for a relationship that had just faced one of its toughest tests. When I returned from Italy, the tension between Jay and me hadn't eased, but the addition of our friends' opinions only magnified the stress. It started with a few offhand comments during a group video call when one of our mutual friends, Mark, mentioned hearing about our little disagreement in Italy. The word choice felt minimizing, and the discussion quickly spiraled from there. "Dude, you left her stranded in Italy. That's harsh," Mark said, shaking his head, his tone more accusatory than concerned. Another friend, Lisa, chimed in. "Yeah, I mean, I get that you're upset, but cutting her off financially, that seems a bit extreme." Their words stung. Here were people who knew us both, who knew our dynamics and the struggles we'd been facing lately, yet it seemed they only saw the situation from one side, Jay's. They weren't there to see the confusion and hurt in my eyes when she told me she wanted to stay behind. They didn't feel the weight of betrayal that I felt when my efforts to mend our relationship were met with a sudden demand for space and independence. I tried to explain my side, to tell them how blindsided I was, how we had planned this trip together as a couple, and how her sudden decision felt like a step away from everything we were supposed to be working on. "It's not about the money," I insisted. "It's about being left out of a major decision that affects both of us. It's about feeling like I'm not a partner but a provider, to be switched on and off." But the conversation didn't go far. Their minds seemed made up, and the more I tried to justify my stance, the more defensive I sounded, which only seemed to validate their criticisms. The call ended with a heavy silence, and I was left feeling isolated, not just from Jay, but from my friends too. This rift made me question a lot of things, not just my relationship with Jay but also my friendships. It felt like they were quick to judge without understanding the full complexity of the situation. Or maybe, I wondered, had I failed to communicate the depth of my feelings effectively? Either way, I felt cornered and misunderstood, caught between defending my boundaries and appearing uncaring to the people whose opinions mattered to me. It was a precarious balance, trying to maintain my stance while navigating the disapproval of friends I had once relied on for support. Update. Wow, I can't believe my situation got so much attention. Well, thank you for all of your advice. A month had dragged by since Jay decided to extend her stay in Italy, a decision that stretched the fabric of our relationship to its limits. The weeks were marked by strained exchanges of messages, brief, cold, and sometimes days apart. I had hoped the distance might bring some perspective, perhaps soften the edges of the conflict we had left simmering. Yet as her return approached, a knot of anxiety grew within me, tightening with each passing day. She didn't call to let me know she was coming. I simply heard the key turn in the lock of our apartment. The sound, once a signal of comfort, now struck a chord of apprehension. As she stepped inside, the air shifted, heavy with the weight of unspoken grievances and pent-up frustrations. She looked different. Tired, yes, but there was also a hard set to her jaw, an armor she had donned during her time away. The door barely closed behind her before the storm broke. "How could you just cut me off like that?" Jay's voice was sharp, her words slicing through the tense air. Her bags dropped to the floor with a thud, mirroring the heavy drop of my heart. I had not cut her off financially without a warning. I had told her during our last painful conversation in Naples that if she chose to stay longer, she would need to do so on her own dime. But it seemed she had either misunderstood or chosen to reinterpret the facts. "I didn't cut you off," I replied, trying to keep my tone level despite the rising tide of emotion. "I said if you decided to stay longer, you'd need to manage without my financial support. You made that choice, not me. You left me stranded in a foreign country," she exclaimed, her face flushed with anger the moment she saw me. The accusation felt like a slap, harsh and unfounded. It was the breaking point after weeks of built-up tension and uncertainty. "I didn't leave you stranded, Jay. You chose to stay. We had a return ticket already booked," I retorted, my voice rising to match hers. I felt betrayed, not just by her decision to extend her stay without discussing it with me, but now by her twisting of the facts. It was as if the careful plans I had made, meant to bring us closer, had been forgotten, discarded like an inconvenient truth. The argument spiraled quickly. Jay paced back and forth in the living room. Each step seemed to echo her escalating frustration. "You could have supported me, understood that I needed more time," she argued, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "And you could have talked to me about it, Jay. Communication goes both ways." I shot back. The gap in our perspectives seemed insurmountable. Finally, with neither of us willing to budge, Jay grabbed her bag and keys and walked out, leaving behind an apartment filled with silence, unresolved tension, and the ghost of what we once were. "I can't do this right now," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I need some space to think, away from here." Without another word, she left the apartment to stay with a friend. The door closed with a definitive thud, marking not just the physical distance between us but the emotional chasm that had now fully formed. The weeks after Jay's departure were a haze of confusion and melancholy. I threw myself into work, avoiding our mutual friends as much as possible, not ready to face their questions or pitying looks. It was during one of these long evenings, as I was leaving the office later than usual, that I ran into Ben, a close friend who had always been like a brother to me. "Hey man," Ben greeted, his expression uneasy, as if he were wrestling with something he wasn't sure he should say. We decided to grab a coffee, finding ourselves seated across from each other in a quiet cafe that was nearly closing for the night. The low hum of the few remaining patrons provided a semblance of privacy. Ben hesitated, stirring his coffee slowly. "Look, I wasn't going to say anything at first. I thought it wasn't my place. And maybe it still isn't, but..." He trailed off, looking at me with a serious expression. "I heard from E. She's close with one of Jay's friends. Jay's been... Well, she borrowed a lot of money from friends and relatives back when she was in Italy." A knot formed in my stomach. "Borrowed money," echoed. The Jay I knew was always financially cautious, almost to a fault. Ben exhaled sharply. "Yeah, and there's more. They said she partied a lot over there. Got pretty wild." He paused, the weight of his next words hanging between us. "She met someone. Something happened. And now she's back. And she's pregnant." The news hit me like a physical blow. Each word felt like a punch, knocking the air from my lungs. Pregnant. My mind raced, struggling to piece together this jarring new reality. But Ben wasn't finished. There's talk that she's planning to make a scene, to claim the kid is yours, to get you to take responsibility. I sat frozen, the coffee in front of me growing cold. It felt surreal, like a plot from one of those over-the-top drama shows Jay and I used to watch together, the kind we'd mock for being too unrealistic. But this was real and it was happening to me. Why would she do this? I finally managed, my voice a mix of disbelief and anger. Ben shook his head. I don't know, man. Maybe she's desperate. Maybe she's not thinking straight. But I figured you should hear it from someone who actually cares about you. I thanked Ben, though my mind was a storm of emotions as I left the cafe. The night air felt sharper, colder as I walked home, my footsteps echoing in the empty streets. Betrayal. Confusion. It all built inside me, swirling into something heavy and inescapable. How was I supposed to confront Jay about this? The trust we had built over years now lay in ruins, leaving me to navigate the debris of our shared past and an uncertain, possibly contentious future. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and distracted days. The seed of doubt Ben had planted grew into an overwhelming tangle of suspicion and uncertainty. Was Jay really planning to betray me so profoundly? Or was this all some kind of misunderstanding? I needed answers, before she could make any moves. I started by reaching out to our mutual friends, casually bringing up Jay in conversation, watching their reactions closely. I steered discussions toward our relationship, searching for any sign of discomfort or evasion, anything that might suggest they knew more than they were letting on. But despite my efforts, nothing substantial came from these interactions. It was as if Ben's revelation existed in a vacuum, leaving me even more isolated with my worries. Frustrated but determined, I decided to go straight to someone who would know the truth. Kay, one of Jay's closest friends. Kay had always been honest with me. She wasn't one to mince words or shield her thoughts behind polite facades. If anyone would tell me the truth, it would be her. I reached out under the pretense of seeking advice on how to repair things with Jay. A half-truth. We met at a small cafe, one of those cozy spots where the warm buzz of background conversations makes it easier to open up. Kay, I started, my voice steady despite the slight tremor in my hands. I've heard some things, and I just want to understand what's going on with Jay. I watched her face closely as I spoke. Her expression shifted from friendly concern to something more guarded. What have you heard? She asked cautiously. I hesitated, then decided to lay it all out. That she might be trying to trap me. That she might try to make me believe I'm responsible for something I had no part in creating. That she might be pregnant, but the circumstances aren't what they seem. Kay's demeanor shifted again, her gaze drifting toward the window. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, laced with something that almost resembled guilt. There's something else you should know. She turned back to face me, her expression a mix of sympathy and resolve. After Jay found out she was pregnant, she panicked. Given everything, she didn't know how to handle it. So, she got a paternity test. Just to be sure. I inhaled sharply. And, Kay hesitated, then exhaled. You're not the father. The words hit me with a finality I hadn't prepared for. My last shred of hope, the faintest possibility that maybe, just maybe, this child could be mine, faded away. But Kay wasn't finished. She was shocked. And, well, the Italian guy. He's out of the picture now. Kay's voice was steady, but her fingers fidgeted with her coffee cup. She's scared. She doesn't know what to do next. And I think in her panic she thought maybe turning to you would somehow fix things. Maybe she convinced herself that if the baby was yours, everything would be easier to handle. I sat back, trying to process the weight of her words. Fear. Desperation. A desperate grasp for stability. Jay's actions suddenly made a twisted kind of sense. Selfish, yes, but also deeply human. Kay looked pained as she spoke again. I'm telling you this because you deserve the truth. It's a mess, I know. But Jay is really struggling. She's mentioned wanting your help. Not just financially but emotionally. Maybe she even hoped that somehow, this could bring you back together. I exhaled slowly, the storm inside me still raging but no longer aimless. Thanks, Kay, I said finally, my voice quieter now. For being honest with me. This changes everything. I need time to figure out how to handle this, without making things worse. Kay nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. And if you ever want to talk, I'm here. As I left the cafe, the night air felt colder than before. The truth had cleared the fog but left me with even heavier decisions. Now more than ever I had to tread carefully. For Jay, for myself, and for the innocent life caught in the middle of it all. The unborn child caught in the middle of this turmoil left me in a whirlwind of emotions. I wasn't sure what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Jay immediately, to demand explanations and hear her side of the story, however painful it might be. Another part of me wanted to retreat, to process the hurt and protect myself from further pain. Every logical step, seeking legal advice, preparing for potential disputes, distancing myself from Jay, felt cold and clinical, far removed from the emotional storm raging inside me. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun had set, and the evening darkness mirrored the uncertainty looming ahead. As I turned my key in the lock, the familiar sound felt strangely foreign, as if even my sense of home was questioning where I belonged. The quiet of my apartment stood in stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I sat alone, Kay's last words echoing in my head. After 3 days of agonizing over everything, I decided it was time to face Jay. I needed clarity and closure, no matter how painful the conversation was going to be. I texted her, asking if we could meet at the little coffee shop where we had spent countless lazy Sunday afternoons together. It felt like a neutral place, public yet intimate, appropriate for the kind of serious conversation we needed to have. She was already there when I arrived, her eyes red-rimmed, a clear sign she'd been crying. As I sat down opposite her, the air felt heavy with all the unspoken words between us. I know everything, Jay, I started, trying to keep my voice calm despite the turmoil inside me. I know about the guy in Italy, the pregnancy, and your plan to make me believe I could be the father. Her face crumpled at my words. I was so confused, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought maybe if you thought the baby was yours, we could go back to how things were. The hurt was palpable, fresh like a wound reopened. I took a deep breath. Jay, we can't go back. Trust doesn't work that way, I replied, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. And I can't just overlook this, it's too big. A long silence stretched between us, filled only by the soft murmur of other patrons and the clink of coffee cups. Finally, I continued. I've decided I'll help you clear your debts from the trip. It's the last thing I can do for you, out of whatever love and care is left. Jay started sobbing, her shoulders shaking. It was tough to watch, knowing how deeply intertwined our lives had been. But I had to finish what I started. After that, we go our separate ways, I added. It's for the best. Helping her financially wasn't just an act of mercy. It was a way to free myself, to let go of guilt, of the what-ifs, and of a relationship that had become too fractured to mend. As hard as it was, I knew it was the right step toward healing, toward not letting this situation keep a hold on me any longer. As I stood up to leave, the finality of the moment sank in. Jay had been a significant part of my life, but this chapter had to close. Walking out of the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. A sorrowful relief, knowing that this was a necessary ending for both of us to move forward. Reflecting on this journey, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who took the time to comment and offer their support and advice. Your words have been a beacon during this tumultuous time, guiding me through moments of doubt and encouraging me when the path seemed too difficult to navigate alone. The wisdom shared in the comments was invaluable, helping me make informed decisions and providing comfort in knowing that I wasn't alone in this struggle. Many of you shared your own stories, reminding me that life's trials are universal, yet they also bring us together in understanding and solidarity. I am especially grateful to those who reminded me to stay true to my values and to approach this situation with integrity and compassion. Your encouragement to prioritize my emotional well-being and seek professional advice was crucial in navigating the complexities of this situation. The reminders about self-care and looking forward after difficult choices helped me maintain perspective and focus on healing. To everyone who commented, your support has made a real difference in my life during this challenging time. I am moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose and hope, buoyed by the kindness and wisdom of this community. Thank you for being a part of my journey.